Hello everyone, and in this video about modern merge, we'll be talking about how to create merges using Power Automate from Razor's Edge NXT exports. There are going to be some scenarios such as pledge installments, tribute letters, membership acknowledgments, where all the data that you need to make those merges are not going to be available via Sky API. So we're going to rely on files exported to your Blackbaud hosted files area in order to provide that information. Since the data transfer experience varies a little bit depending on where you're hosted in the hosting environment, this workflow is designed for customers hosted in Azure. However, we do plan on updating this for other customers in other Blackbaud hosting environments. We're actually assuming as well that you've gone through the steps to do the merges based on a web view list, as this kind of builds on those same thought processes there. We're also, as part of that, going to assume that you have access to the encoding and free trial, Razor's Edge NXT, SharePoint, Microsoft Outlook, and Microsoft Word, your premium license for Power Automate, as well as access to your FTP folder. See Knowledge Base article 190010 for how to get to that in Azure. The export information is going to be pretty straightforward. Here is the basics that the flow is going to need. Gift amount, installment frequency, next transaction date, system record ID of the gift, the name of the constituent, and the system record ID of the constituent. If you have the Razor's Edge QU module, you can actually automate a bit as far as getting that information, those exports into the FTP folder. Now, as a review to actually get information as far as how to access your FTP folder, if you're in Azure, when you go to the little pancake area here, you'll be able to click on Database Options and find your username and server and password and when that's going to expire. You'll need to rotate and unlock your password on a regular basis. So you'll actually have that username, password, and server information. You'll need that for the connection. You'll also need one other piece of information, and that's exactly where your FTP folder is. Every organization's FTP folder has a cryptic part to the path, I presume because of security, so you're going to need to get that information as well. And the way you get that is that when you actually go through and do a test export, you'll go through, you're in Razor's Edge, the database view. I want to do a test export, so I can put my pledge reminder export.csv. Notice the spelling and the capitalization. When I go to my tenant file share and I click on FTP, there's going to be this cryptic part of it's kind of covered in the screenshot, cryptic part of the file location or the folder location within the hosting area. And it's going to be that cryptic set of characters between the two slashes that you're going to need. So make sure you copy that. Don't get the slashes. Don't get anything that says tenant files. Don't get the letters FTP, but everything between those two slashes. Now, that's what you're going to need. Save that in a notepad for a few moments. You're going to need that as you go through and set up your flow for the first time. As far as the flow goes, those of you, again, assuming that you've gone through and have done the other steps for the simple one based on a web view, it's going to be very similar. The biggest thing is going to be in where we're getting the data from. And again, that's going to be from the FTP. So we're going to go through, we're going to grab the data from FTP. We're going to cycle through each of the rows in the export. Based on those, we're going to create a merge letter, a merge envelope, save those letters on envelopes individually and combined on a SharePoint folder, and then make a notification to an intended recipient once those are ready. So again, pretty similar to the previous one. Main difference doing we're basing this on an export. As we're taking a look at the flow, as I scroll through here again, you're going to see a number of similar things that you saw during the web view based one. The biggest differences I'm going to point out, such as that cryptic part of the file folder, copy and paste this here in the initialized variable specific folder, and this value here, you'll actually be able to go through and paste that there, and that's the only place you'll actually need to paste that. As far as this file path here, really don't need to change this as far as getting it from the FTP. The first time it's set up, it will ask you for your FTP credentials, so you got that from a previous step. Don't really need to go through and change anything here. The key thing being is that, the way that the exports typically happen out of Razor's Edge is that the extension is capital letters. So make sure you, as far as creating that export within Razor's Edge, and as far as making sure you got things set up here, make sure all that lines up. So the key things, the rest of this flow is going to be very similar. If there's nothing to get, then it's actually going to send an email out that says, hey, there's no reminders to send out for today. A couple things that I will point out that you have as far as a couple of options is that if you want to, now this is going to be one of the differences between the other one, is that you don't necessarily actually have to save a local file of that initial data anywhere. You can if you want to. By default, the flow does not do that. You're going to see this little orange beaker. That means basically, long story short, I'm not running this part of the flow. If you want to save a backup of that original file on a regular as you go through it, then go through and make sure that you go through and select the static result, and I disable static result. When I have that done, then it's going to make it so that things are going to go out and save in a local folder. We're going to see that same scenario when we go through and take a look at whether or not you want to create a gift attachment or go ahead and create a constituent action. You may not want to have those on to begin with as you go through and test this a few times. So again, the key thing is this is going to be very similar to what you saw in the web view based export, but a number of different nuanced differences because we're doing this via an FTP export.